Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Take a Stand. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson, and this morning I have the wonderful Jennifer Hotchner back with me. You may remember probably about 6 or 7 weeks ago, I had Jennifer on the show, and we were talking about all things trauma, about how to really recover or how to deal with any trauma in your life. And I've actually asked Jen to come back because after that show, we had so many people asking questions. And the one question that was left with us was how to deal with shame. So this topic of shame that often we as women or as we as humans, we kind of take on board and we carry that with us for a long, long time, sometimes for decades and decades. And often that can be the thing that holds us back. So I asked Jen if she would mind coming back on the show. I promised you guys that I would get her back, and here she is today. And I'm really, really grateful to have somebody with her level of expertise and compassion for human beings and for what it is that she does actually be here on the show to actually help all of our guests and all of our viewers with this particular subject matter. So Jen specializes in spirituality, focus counseling and trauma. And she's received training across EMDR and somatic experiencing. So I want to make sure that, as we're moving through today, if you watch the previous show, you'll know that Jennifer really does feel her way through a lot of things. And you're going to see that. I really noticed that and observed her doing that through the last show. So I want to let you guys know that that will probably happen again today. And I think you will be absolutely blown away by her methodology and the way in which she deals with things and helps. Hello, Kat. So for those of you that are listening on the podcast right now, live, and as you do, you have your animals in your household. We just had Jen's little her cat just arrived, wanted to say hello, big cat, to say hello. So I want to welcome her back to the show and thank you very much for agreeing to be here and to help many people work their way through this subject of shame, because like I said, we often carry that with us and we don't always know what do we I've got this attached to me, what do I do with this darn thing? So let's start off with maybe sharing a little bit about something that from the previous show, Jen, that you really identified from our audience and why we're now talking about shame, why you think this was such a topic that many women were asking about.
Okay.
Is this pretty typical? Not.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thanks. And thank you, Tracy, for warning folks that I'm going to feel my way through the show. I needed that reminder and that permission because I definitely do that. I take it slow, and it's important for me to stay with what's arising so that it can feel authentic. So, I think shame is such an important topic, especially when we left off about trauma, because often with trauma, we decide something about ourselves. And it's when we decide something about ourselves that some sort of version of ourselves thrives in the dark. And this is often manifested as shame. So today we are going to attempt to pull in a little closer to shame, what it is, and then how to deal with it. Deal is not my favorite word, but we can talk more about that as we go along. But how to at least face it, go towards it, and unlock it so that it's not unconsciously thriving in the dark and running our lives. Again, shame in association with trauma, I'm just feeling into, shame probably isn't just about trauma, but it is about what we've decided about ourselves. So maybe I'll just leave that there. And then, as I told you, I have something small that I wrote right before the show, and I'd like to read that, and then maybe we can unpack and go further and explore.
Please do. Let's do that. So I'll let you start with your reading, and then, like you say, we can unpackage it and go from there.
Okay.
Floor is
All
yours.
right. So, the tendency with shame is to either lie underneath it, let it have its way with us, or to move about in our lives trying to avoid feeling it or compensating for it. The truth is, no one outside of us is experiencing our shame. So in the end, no matter how much we read about it, conceptualize it, or talk about it, eventually there is only one person, the one warrior, that can truly resolve it, and that is you, the one feeling it. Shame is the most painful, visceral representation of what we have decided about ourselves. Shame is the most painful, visceral representation of what we have decided about ourselves. Shame is the physical, emotional, and mental imprint and expression of what we have decided about ourselves. And thus, unlocking for ourselves what that is the key to our liberation of it. A lot of us spend most of our time wandering around shame by trying to figure out where it came from. Did it come from abuse, trauma, society's expectations? Was it inherited, passed down through my ancestral lineage? And yes, this type of inquiry and investigation is very useful and often at least gets us closer to our shame. But if we stay on its edges like that, we remain its victim. If we are constantly spending our attention on the why it exists, we remain powerless to its impact. Eventually, the arrow of inquiry has to sharpen and go right towards it. All the reasons for the shame have to become less important than finding out what version of you, again, what you have decided about yourself, is thriving in the dark and therefore unconsciously driving your life. And this is where you take a stand. This is where the warrior comes in. For make no mistake about this, no one else but you can be the one to change your mind about you. It will never work to ask someone else to decide for you what you are. And this is shame's incredible gift for us. For it is our job to enter the dark, sit down in its hell, listen to what it's saying about us, sincerely listen, and then find the courage to simply ask, is it true?
Well, firstly, that was beautiful and so well written. And I've read many of your things on your Facebook page, and you are a very, very talented writer when it comes to writing those things that are very, I'm going to say, heartfelt and very thought out and intuitive in the way in which you put those together. As you were reading that, I have written, as you said, I'll read this and then we'll unpackage it. So I made some notes about the things where I would like to go and what I would like to ask as a result of what I heard today. And I also want to ask our audience, because this is live, that we now have an opportunity for them also to just sit with that. You had an opportunity to listen to it, to be with what Jennifer was just reading to us. And I want to know from you, what were your thoughts and what questions do you have that you would like us to unpackage today as a result of what Jennifer has just read? So one of the things that's really stands out for me, Jen, is that, I wrote down here, bringing shame closer. So like getting, you're really almost like embracing it and accepting it and getting really close and personal with that, so that you can start to unpackage it yourself. And you said one of the things you mentioned in there is that quite often we start to search and look for other people to try and help us deal with that level of, with the shame. And yes, as much as we might be able to outreach to somebody like you or listen to this sort of show and get some tips and pointers, but ultimately, you as the individual, you, the person who believes that you are carrying this shame, is the only warrior that is able to disarm that shame so that it no longer has the hold on you. So let's talk about that now that we kind of understand that the shame is kind of is really attached to a belief that we have created about ourselves. And how does one get themselves, how does one firstly get themselves to a point where they feel comfortable enough? Because the natural reaction would be, I want to run away from this and I want to try and get away from this as much as I can because it's painful, it's hurtful, I don't enjoy these feelings. So how can we get, for want of a better word, comfortable enough and almost having the courage to face that? He wants to be in the show today.
He's really making sure that I don't take myself too seriously here. Yeah, thank you. That's such an important question, because the truth is, shame is so strong viscerally. It is not fair to say that it's just an emotion, that it's just mental. I mean, we actually have a very, very strong physical and oftentimes trauma-related response to it. So how do we get comfortable bringing it closer, or as I sort of alluded to in the writing, entering the den of ourselves, going towards it. And, I kind of think about it as concentric circles. And just want to say that you can have support and help in going towards it, like talking with a therapist, like writing about it. Let me just pause here. It's sort of like you are at least committing to continue to go towards it. And when you start to enter in and you feel terror, or you feel fear, or you feel that wanting to run away, you pause. And you throw your cat off your lap. You pause, and you check in, and you make sure you are okay. And you spend as much time as you need on that one edge. And this is where you start to flush out what shame is saying about you, because usually, so you're going in closer and then you feel that tremor, that fear. Okay, you've gotten to a gateway there. And if you listen, you can start to hear what shame is, what it's saying, what it's got its hold. So don't go any closer. You're gonna, gosh, in some cases you're gonna die. You're gonna fail, or it'll say you're so weak you shouldn't even be feeling this fear. Anyways, it starts to throw up, right? It's messages about you. So you're pausing there, and then maybe there's some asking if it's true. I'm just throwing out a technique, but really I'm more just trying to portray the feel for going closer. Then, and this doesn't happen in one session, one moment. This is over and over. Then you go in again, and maybe you get a little closer, and then you hit another quivering gateway of fear. And then the same process happens, and you listen, and you start to see what it is that it's saying about you. And then you go in closer and closer and closer and closer. Eventually, you get to the point where, let me just pause here. You're so vulnerable. You're so with yourself that coming in, having the courage to go towards this more and more and more and more is a true act of love. It's the truest courage. It's the truest act of love. And as you get into that closest, most vulnerable part, you have developed along the way enough stability to really face this and really ask, I want to cuss here, what the fuck is going on here? What have I decided about myself? And honestly, in all the years that I have worked, we can narrow it down to just a few statements. I'm not good enough. I'm bad. I'm not worthy. I'm not lovable. It's usually those. And then you're there, you're right there, and you just, is that true? Is that true? And this is where it's important to open up, and this is how on my website I talk about the soul or the bigger being or the higher self. This is where it's important when you ask, is that true, to pause and open up and listen and receive from a bigger source of your being rather than the habitual conceptual mind. You really ask, you want to know, is this true? You're doing a truth dive here. So I think with the point to your question, how do we get comfortable? You don't get comfortable. You practice getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And then that's how you get more comfortable. Mm-hmm. Because if you're going to keep trying to get comfortable, you may just fall into the same patterns that we are very much used to, and we don't even notice. We feel that tinge of shame, and we just do what we usually do, which is, some folks, that's what makes them really successful. They're high earners, or they go and they compensate and they work hard all their life, but something isn't quite authentic about it. What's driving it is an insecurity. Or some people just fully just have it gobble them up and never question it. So this isn't about necessarily being comfortable, but it's about going another way with the discomfort to really get to the truth of this. I'm going to stop talking there. Yeah.
So I'm sort of hearing this as more of like a compass or a navigation method of how to navigate your way around it, rather than sort of dealing with it, so to speak. It's the recognition, and then I'm recognizing this is the case. I need to come closer to that. I need to find the courage to get a little bit closer, and as closer as I can get, potentially over a period of time. I've got a question now about this. When we look at the hierarchy of feelings, for example, shame is one of those feelings that sits right up the top. It's almost like the worst. Often people will say it's the worst state to be in, when you are feeling like you're collecting all these things that make you feel like you're in a state of shame, which then has a whole lot of other potential, thoughts, feelings, ramifications that come from that. What are often some of the signs that we would see that potentially you don't go straight from, hey, this has happened, this has been a traumatic situation, and now I'm automatically at shame? Maybe that is the case for some things. And others, maybe it's not. Maybe it is just a process of continually maybe being in your head and layering a belief upon a belief upon a belief that then turns itself into shame. What is the normal, I suppose, process here? What do we normally see happen with people to get them to a point where they're feeling the shame?
Ooh, I am not sure if I understood that question, only because the question had a lot in it. I think in the question you were describing different ways that shame shows up for us, right?
Yeah.
And also, I just, before I ask you to clarify the question again, and thank you so much. I really appreciate how you're exploring this with me, because yeah, it's deep. You said something that I don't want to pass over because it's really important. You said the way I'm describing this is more like a navigation, like a compass, rather than trying to get rid of. So oftentimes when we say, I'm going to deal with it, I'm going to cope with it, especially for some reason in today's world, we're really underneath, I'm sensing we're really trying to get rid of. I don't want to feel it anymore, I'm going to conquer it. But you really brought up something important, which this is more of an acceptance, getting into a relationship with it, getting into navigation with it, because when we do that, that in itself, whether or not shame leaves us, the turning towards it, the being in relationship with it, the investigation of it, that in itself starts to lessen its power over us. Mm-hmm. It's like, I forgot what writer said this, but it's like you keep running away from the boogeyman. It just becomes this bigger and bigger boogeyman. It's so scary. But we know now with trauma, with pain, that if we can start to turn towards it and get closer to it, the boogeyman, we see actually what it is. And it's not something that is so scary after all when we get closer and closer to it. So that is the process here. Now, okay, back to your question, which I didn't quite, if you can clarify. Yeah.
Sure. I was just thinking more about, when somebody is getting to a point where because some people might not even recognize that, hey, these feelings that I'm having are shame. Like I'm feeling like, how do they, and I know we talked about this a little bit earlier and you said, well, most people know that's the feeling that they're having, but I'm not sure that necessarily is the case. Like how do you distinguish maybe something between fear and shame and how, because as far as like the power of something or the power that we give to something, I'm feeling like shame when we give it, has a lot of power to it, and it can tend to be really, really heavy. And again, I'm just trying to feel into this too. And you mentioned earlier that stepping out of the zone, I'm going to call it the zone of victimhood, is like stepping out of being the victim. And also you mentioned that we often try to find the reason why is this happening to me? Is it in my background? Is it something that's gone on? Is it my past? Is it in my genes? Like we try and find all of those things to try and almost try and find the root cause to disarm it. So I'm wondering if, and this is probably, but I've gone around in a bit of a convoluted way here and probably confused the situation even further, but I'm just I'm thinking of a few people in my life, right, who I know are carrying this sort of, let's call it baggage. And I want to help them to understand how to navigate it, but also how to recognize when we are carrying that, because often you mentioned, the way that we deal with it is to kind of compensate in another way. But another way to deal with it is just to push it down. Didn't happen. I'm not feeling that. Let's just kind of like shove it down as deep as I possibly can. But we know that when we do that, it tends to manifest itself in some other way, shape, or form. So that being said, how does one recognize that it's shame and not something else?
Yeah, okay.
Like that.
You know, I don't think it's necessary to know what it is in the sense of be able to call it something. Oh, this is shame, or oh, this is fear. In other words, if you're able to identify it and name it, and that does feel supportive, great. But I don't feel that the working with it, the healing of it is, or the going towards it, like we've been talking about, is dependent on being able to name it, to know what it is first. If someone, you know, is having, that's why often I just talk about these as arisings. And, you know, as, and arisings, pain, discord, quivering, you know, there's so many ways that this starts to show up. And you're right, because it has been maybe shoved down so deep, it is unrecognizable or very easily deniable, or it's just been interpreted for years as something else. So it just isn't gonna be unrecognizable. So that's where, you know, what I talk about with clients, and then, you know, also briefly on my website, it doesn't matter, is, you know, we have a feedback system. We all have an inherent feedback system. This is the news. We know when something's off. We call it pain. And it's got many different expressions. It's got many different labels. It's got many different faces. And, you know, what we're talking about here is when it's up, we start to, instead of, like you said, going into the corridors of our minds. And, you know, I did say maybe stepping into victimhood. It's not victimhood. I really want to make this clear, because I think people have a right to call themselves victims. So I just want to make that clear. First and foremost, please, if you're out there and you are a victim, you are a victim. Okay, so that's okay. What I mean when I said victim, and I don't know how I said it, is mostly victims of our own corridors of our psyches. Mm-hmm. That's the victimhood I'd like us to step out of. That is our job, and that is our empowerment, is when we have pain, when we have discord, when we have shame, our tendency, all of us, our tendency is to go into past or future or storyline. We image ourselves. We have versions of ourselves that get reinforced. It also sort of kind of arises in a habitual type of, in a habitual way. That's how we tend to meet the arisings. So I talk about this as, you know, we have these bottom-up arisings, we have these top-down interpretations that are more the versions of ourselves, the stories, and that's where our victimhood can be found. It's what we decided about ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then we take this leap into getting more personal, meaning personal with the feelings, the sensations, the bottom-up arisings themselves, versus following along in the stories, in the corridors of the minds, which tend to be, it's the way that, for whatever reason, is part of the system's way of trying to, it thinks it's trying to figure it out. It thinks it's trying to make it better. And if you notice, it's not working. So we are actually going towards the vulnerability. We're going towards it. And then, like I said, and this is just something people have to try out for themselves. When we go towards our feeling, our felt sense, it starts to soothe it in and of itself right then and there, because we are backing out from one of the most vicious cycles of pain that we get caught in, which is the replaying of our versions of ourselves in our minds. When we back out of that, investing in that, this is all just attention, and bring it into our beingness, where all the arisings are happening in and of itself. That in and of itself, that first step, starts to soothe and allow for a different sense of ourselves, a different voice, a different response to come in. And Tracy, what I know to be true, and I feel so lucky to be able to say this, is that the truth of of the essence of our being is always kinder than what we're thinking and believing, always kinder. So that's why I say, when we go towards the shame, we're going to find love. We're going to find power. We're going to find peace. That's all this wants for us.
I love that, Jen, and thank you for clarifying those points. And I know I've sort of drawn on a few different things from from the previous show, and I'm glad that you've made those clear and the distinction there. But also, just sort of understanding, like often, as you say, and even what I was asking you the question of, is like that labelizing of what is this? Is this, am I feeling this? Am I feeling that? Is it fear? Is it shame? Like, what is this? And the point that you make is it's not important what it is. It's just the fact that you're feeling that bubbling up of something. So therefore, whatever that is, move towards it, because as you move towards it and you're able to start to navigate that, you then start to break down I'm going to call it the chains that are associated with that then at the closer and closer you get to it, the less and less power you give to it. And then all of a sudden you get to the point where, hang on a minute, I'm finding the truth here. I'm sitting in my truth, and no longer does this belief that I have created, or a story that I have habitually told myself to become true in my mind, is no longer true in my mind, because I've created a new narrative and a new story and disarmed that feeling that I had. So I love that that journey and that process of like the recognition, the acceptance, the moving towards, and then being able to disarm.
And I love the way you repeated that back in your own words and how you packaged it for us. Yeah, thank you. That was so wonderful to hear you express that back in your own way. And that's how I would encourage everyone to, just kind of feel into what is being encouraged here and find their own way, their own wording with it. And I loved how you worded it. So thank you for that. Yeah.
What, in your experience, Jim, when somebody does this, and there's a lot of talk about being, authentic and finding the true you, and, being on purpose and all of those sorts of things, and listening to your, almost being, listening to your intuition and allowing that to give you a guidance, allowing it to guide you through whatever it is that you're you're doing, you're facing, you're planning. How do you do that? Because I know this is kind of getting a little bit personal here, but you've been through this journey yourself, like in terms of, okay, I started out in the, being the professional space, and then you very, very much over a period of time, whether it was a period of time or whether you just were born this way and you've always accepted your spirituality and your ability to be able to pause, go quiet and listen within. Has that been something you've worked on, or has that been something that you have been, I mean, everybody has the gift, I believe. Not everybody uses that gift to their advantage or to the best of their ability.
Yeah. Is it something I have worked on, or is it something that came? I'm not sure what that's okay. Yes, go ahead. Were you gonna?
Or that you,
yeah.
I mean, there are people that would say, I was born this way.
And yeah.
Maybe you were, but you didn't necessarily accept it or embrace it until a little bit further on in life.
Yeah. That's such a beautiful question. And I wonder how I'll answer it. That's a good one to take a moment with. I mean, it's definitely something I've worked on and something that has been given. But by given, the only thing that's meant by given is that when I've worked on it, when I've opened to it, it's there. Mm-hmm. It's there. When we pause, when we back out of our usual way of knowing ourselves, where do we go? It's not like we're changing bodies or changing, it's meeting what's already there. So what's been given is what's already inherently what we are, mm-hmm. the truth of what we are. And, I think there's no mistake that it's so hard to find words for the truth of what we are. And yet it is so easy to find words for what we're not. We go on and on all day long. We babble on and on, the commentator on and on about what we are, So I think somewhere along the way, and I'm not at any, I'm on excitedly, I'm continuing this journey and this process. I have not arrived anywhere, but somewhere along the way, I started to notice that we all have a feedback system. Mm-hmm. In the psychotherapy field, and I'm not trying to, and not just the psychotherapy field, in the medical field, in the psychology field, and I'm not trying to put it down, but we have a lot of diagnoses for our feedback system, meaning pain, which but I'm looking at this a little differently. We have a feedback system that tells us when we are moving closer to truth and tells us when we are moving more into a lie. And it's pain. Mm-hmm. And I notice this in sessions and working with people, I've noticed this over and over. So every day I have a chance to really test out this feedback system. And I just encourage all of us to, when I am opening to another way, the bigger beingness, which always is a right here, right now, there's usually a sense of ease, a sense of rightness, a kinderness. Even if there's still pain, it's got a sense of something clicking in. When I'm moving more into the corridors of my mind streams, we feel confusion, chaotic, painful. We go around and around. And of course, we feel this in our bodies. I'm not just saying it's just up here, but that's the discernment I like to bring to people's awareness as our own feedback system here. And then what I said earlier, the truth, the essence of our being is always kinder than what we're thinking and believing. The problem is that what we're calling the truth of being here, it has no past and it has no future. It has no images of us. It has nothing we can hang on to. So our minds don't trust it. We've got to find an image of us in the future where I'm going to be okay and I'm never going to look bad, or it's going to go to the past to say, no, you should be scared because this, it's images, and I'm not saying that that's wrong. All I'm saying is there's another way. There's another way. There's another way. Yeah.
And isn't that interesting? Because even if you are, sometimes we do things and you're like, it might not even make logical sense why you're wanting to do something, a particular thing. But when you sit back and maybe somebody else asks you why you're doing that, or you even stop for a moment and ask yourself why, often we'll come up with, because it just feels right. And so that really simple question of asking yourself why, and if the answer is because it feels right, more than likely it is. It's going to be right, because it's that moment where you're sitting. It's the truth of you lies there. It says yes. The feeling is right. I just have to move in this direction. Sometimes we don't even know why. Sometimes we don't even have an explanation for what it is that we're doing, except for the fact that it just feels right.
That's right. Yeah, it's a blind faith, isn't it? We do not get guarantees or the images of the future. So it is such a leap of faith. And, I think when we're talking about shame and going into ourselves, isn't it interesting that we go in with that same leap of faith? Mm-hmm. Because we don't know what's going to happen. But the mind, what has developed along the way in our lives based on our conditioning, based on what we've learned, based on humanity right now, is that we have come to believe that the emotions, the arisings that we have in our being, that we have judgments about them. We should be afraid of them. They mean we're weak. That we interpret them. So this is a blind faith to actually not know yourself and go towards yourself anyways. And then hit what you think you know and feel that fear and that quiver, and keep going and question it and keep going towards what you don't know. Pause there. I don't know what else wanted to be said, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll come. But I mean, I think out of today in this session, we started off because we had so many people asking about this particular topic. When we left at the last show that you and I did together, people were asking, I have the shame. How do I deal with it? What do I need to do? And through working through and navigating some of the techniques and the methods in which you help people to I don't want to use the word deal, but navigate their way through it, move towards it, and be comfortable enough to be able to confront what they're feeling, what they're seeing in, I'm going to say, because you use imagery, what they're seeing in their mind, to then start creating a new narrative and a new story for themselves has been really, really powerful today. And I hope that everybody has enjoyed Jennifer being back on the show. She is our resident, therapist that we have psychomatic therapist that we have on the show, and I would love to have her back to do, again and again and again, because this topic is so interesting and it's such a powerful thing to be talking about in this space. Because if we can help people to identify, recognize, be aware, sit with the truth of who they are, then I firmly believe that that makes for a better, it helps to change people's lives, and it certainly helps to make a better world. So I want to thank you so much for being here today, Jen. I want to let everybody, someone's saying here, yes, please come back. I want you to talk about anxiety and depression too. So you just never know. That may well be a topic that we can talk about a little bit further down the track, when and if Jen has the time to be able to come back and have some more conversations with us. But before we dial out, I wanted to give the audience an opportunity to ask any questions if you do have any. If you're catching this on the replay, just hashtag replay and type your question in the comment section, and we'll make sure that we get back to you. Likewise, if you have a particular subject matter that you would like us to talk about, then head on over to tracymwilson.com. You can see it just underneath my picture there, and you'll be able to submit your question via audio request on my website, and that way I can make sure that we're prepared and we can ask Jen and any other guest for that matter any question that you might have. Somebody else is asking, what is the self-care that you can do as you move towards the shame? Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah. What is the self-care that you can do as you move towards the shame? What's coming to me right now, and there's no perfect, right, fixed answer. It will be different for everyone. And, self-care is such a big term, and it's got different layers of it, right? We've got like self-care in the form of exercise and good food and walks in nature and things like that, which are always supportive to the just to the ground, the ground of our being. But I guess what's coming through for me right now in response to that question is gentleness and fierceness. Give yourself full permission to be afraid and to go gently. To go gently means to give yourself permission to not push yourself, to not have any expectations, and to pause when you need to pause around those pockets of fear. And pause there, stay there. And that is where, self-care might need to come in more. That might be a blanket wrapped around you. That might be, listening very thoughtfully for what voices are attacking at that point. You pause there and you question the voices, and you also allow for those deeper feelings to arise. You also can give yourself permission to distract, and that's enough for today. So I would say permission to go gently and to pause around the deeper pockets. And then I think on the other side of this, also a self-care act would be give yourself permission to love yourself enough and be a warrior enough that you do not want to let this thrive anymore without your permission. We have to go in there and bring to light what we have decided about ourselves. So part of the self-care might also be to make a commitment. Doesn't matter when or how long it takes or what it looks like, but to make a commitment to know the truth about yourself. And so that is a level of courage, a level of fierceness. So gentleness and fierceness. And self-care, we could go on and on. So thank you about that question. There's probably a lot more. I guess I also want to say, do not be afraid to soothe. Do not be afraid. It is okay to soothe along the way. Soothing is different than fixing. People often get those confused. They think that they're going to soothe by finding the right thought or the right version of themselves. No, we're not talking about. Soothing is actually like, it's felt sense. It's felt sense. Oh, sweetheart. Oh, sweetheart. Do you notice our hands never just reach up and pinch us or slap us for no reason? Do you notice that? Our hands they don't just, out of the blue, just whack us or pinch you no, our hands are always doing this. So pay attention to the soothing that's happening along the way here.
That is so true, and a very true observation. So I would love that, we've got some people that are asking some questions that you've shared, those moments of like, how do we recognize it? Even just that whole awareness of the fact that our hands do a lot of, they do soothe us in so many ways as we're when and if required. Someone's saying here, I loved your vulnerability. It helps me feel my softness. Yes. So next time, if we get an opportunity for Jen to come back, we will go down the path of potentially anxiety and depression, as somebody is asking here. But for today, I want to say thank you so much to Jennifer for being here. And what's the cat's name? We've got to know now.
Yeah, this is Lancaster.
Lancaster. Well, there you go. Thank you, Jen and Lancaster, for being here today, because he just absolutely had to be part of the show. And
yeah.
and I want to make sure that, today we were talking about, that shame and what we do with that, and how to the healer, Lancaster Kitty, someone's saying, and how to navigate our way through that. And I think you've demonstrated that beautifully today on some of the things that people can do to really help them move through and navigate that those feelings. So I want to say thank you very much for being here today, Jen. And I wanted to give you an opportunity before we dial out, if there's anything else that you would like to add on this particular topic. And if not, then I'm going to say, then I'll wrap us up.
Yeah, no, I think I've talked a lot, and just want to thank you so much for, and your listeners, for the opportunity to explore this very important matter, what we decided about ourselves. It's urgent. It's urgent. We must go there. So thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this. And I look forward to coming again if that works out.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being here. And everybody, if you would like to learn more about Jennifer and her amazing work that she does, head on over to her new website, which is jenniferhotchner.com. And you can read all about her and maybe even get some additional assistance if you would like it. She's there, and her and her team are available. So make sure you do that, and then keep your eyes and ears peeled for, future episodes of Take a Stand, because you just never know when Jen might be back making another professional appearance on the Take a Stand show. But for now, I want to say thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being vulnerable, open, and so loving with all of the information that you always share. You're a pleasure to have on the show, and I know our viewers will thoroughly enjoy listening to you and listening to your wisdom and your advice. So thanks very much. For everybody else, thank you very much for listening today. I'm going to be back again with another episode of Take a Stand next week on Thursday, with another story from another amazing woman who will inspire you, who will motivate you, and also share with you the ways in which she's overcome the challenges in her life to be able to stand up, stand firm, and stand out in her family, her business, and her life. So thanks very much, everybody, and I'll see you again next week on another episode of Take a Stand. Bye for now.